we now have a generation of people who don't know what Christianity teaches, except in sort of a vague way. They're foreigners to the gospel. And so it's interesting to see people who weirdly are familiar with Christianity but are not familiar with the gospel. Because I would say that are you a millennial, Eric?
I qualify.
You qualify as a millennial. I would say that the boomers definitely brought Gen X to church, and Gen X definitely brought the millennials to church. But the millennials, by and large, are not going to be taking their kids to church, generally speaking. And Gen Z, and as a person in Gen Z who just had a kid, Gen Z is not. We're not bringing our kids to church. Like, we've completely shed the trappings of traditional religion. I'm bringing my kid to church because, obviously, but it's just going to be interesting to see what this looks like when we no longer have the vestiges of organized religion externally or internally, and what we do moving forward. Because I think, Eric, I don't know if you agree, America is now definitively in a post-Christian era to me, and there's no use kind of pretending that we don't. I think Christianity is kind of dead as a nominative, uniting figurehead in the American public life, and we've switched wholesale into politics. And politicians will still try to play the religious card, but they're not doing it for Gen Z. They're doing that for the boomers and Gen X. They're not doing that for the young people. They're doing other things for the young people that are definitely not related to religion in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, actually, when you added the switch to politics part, I wasn't with you, and then I was immediately with you. Because that was kind of what I was angling at with the post George W. Bush breakdown of our politics, that you essentially had these two currents in American history line up at the same time, which was the fragmentation of the politics after Bush kind of, and I'm only bringing them up because this is like historical analysis will easily play this out. I'm not kidding. You can go back and watch 6 months into Obama's first term, they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize. And Obama himself was flabbergasted. He was like, what did I do? I'm black and I talk like JFK, but I barely know this job. And it's like, and I mean, I'm not saying that the black part was just like, I mean, the wave was a thing. Like people, I remember the slogan "Dreams come true" being attached to it.
Yeah.
So the point being that after Bush, when Obama came in, you had an initial but very brief wave of optimism that things were going to go back to that moment that Bush had broken. And that the financial collapse had broken, but unfortunately, they were very troublous times, as the Bible would call it, and I don't know that anyone was going to come in and fix that train before it went completely off the rails. The events had been set in motion, and I think Obama was kind of a mid-level president. As a charismatic figure, he served as a rallying point for a time, but like I said, no one was going to fix this. Democrat, Republican, Independent, no one was, and it coincided with this general secularization of the culture that was already taking place for other reasons that you were talking about, where you could probably pin it at the sexual revolution, where you had the gradual phenomenon of parents taking their kids to church less and less and less, and the general opening up of public morality. And all of this came together at exactly the wrong time, where if any of these strands had operated individually, the culture, the political culture, the social culture could have survived it without the hyper-polarized, broken fragmentation that we see today. but it came at the wrong time. And it came at a time when people were turning away from their traditional identities and traditional denominations, and were looking, therefore, for something new. And to circle this around, the new atheists believed that their contribution to it was going to lead humanity into an age of reason and enlightenment and utopia. And instead, what you got was just madness on both sides. You just had the rise of political extremism. Now, in the American context, that doesn't typically involve what it did in Germany in the 30s and death battles between competing brigades of communists and Nazis, but kind of our social media equivalent of that.
And I think that the funny thing about the new atheists is that they thought that if they got rid of Christian theism, they could replace it with maybe like the French did during the French Revolution. They stormed Notre Dame and they cut off all the saint statues, and they declared it a temple to reason. But that it's like, okay, it's still the religious impulse, but now we're just doing a temple to reason. So I feel like that was the very naive impulse of the new atheists. And instead, everyone just started buying crystals. You know what I mean? That became the religion. It's like, well, I think you're stupid for believing in Jesus, but I have to go check my zodiac. That's a lot more common in Gen Z, and it's a lot more maybe democratic's the wrong word, but it's a lot more like populist religion, where it's like, well, my zodiac sign doesn't require anything of me, and my crystals don't make me, I don't need to do anything that doesn't feel good. I can kind of live life. And so it's been interesting for me that people have jettisoned mainstream religion, but it's not for theological reasons. They're open to the theology of it, but it's more about, at least in Gen Z, it's far more about what do you think? What am I trying to say, Eric?
Well, I'll wrap up this installation with this thought, that my experience has been, and I'm gonna say something loopy here, but I really mean it. It's far more about whatever, because it's people are just are very much functional pagans again. Some are literal pagans. That's an increasing thing too. But generally speaking, it's that same mentality that the apostles encountered, because paganism is the idea that you can take this tradition. Pagans essentially they were very pragmatic.